Good morning. Having a little discussion about bonds. I was the of 9 or 10 people in the chat. There was 9 people on the other side, and of course me, uh, me representing what I thought. Um, and the question that come up was bonds, and I was arguing that the raising the interest rate by 1/4 of 1% uh, really wouldn't affect too much because how low interest rates are presently. They would go from 0 to 1/4 of 1%, and that would give the Fed, that would give them a little bit of leeway so that if they had to give it back, they could give it back. Now they can't give a damn thing because it's at 0%. Now, the effect this 1/4% would have on other bonds being issued or mortgages and such would be only that 1/4% because the banks and other lending organizations and firms have their standard markup. So if the markup's 2% for a bank where they make money, um, then raising it 1/4%, it's going to raise that 1/4%. Now, a lot of banks have the lowest borrowing rates ever, simply because the the Fed rate is 0. Now, these institutions make a lot of money off of fees, so their primary source uh, is maybe that 2%, but they charge a lot of money to get that 2%. Hey, you see advertised 3.75% mortgages and all that. Well, hardly anybody gets any of those. A friend of mine recently took out a loan, a home equity loan for $75,000, uh, and he got a 4% interest rate. That's great, but in the process, he was charged $5,000 in fees. So he wasn't paying 4%. He was paying a lot more than that. The bank gets you one way or another, but mostly, presently, they get you in every fee possible. But we were discussing the return on bonds, and you say, why would anybody want a 10-year bond at 2%? Well, they might think deflation is coming. They might think that their money isn't secure anyplace else. You can't put it. It used to be you could put it in a savings account, or you could put it in a CD, but they're not paying anything. So you might take the 2% just for the guarantee, that another aim of the Fed is to keep inflation around or under 2%, so that at least you won't be losing any money. Now, bonds have a tendency to float. Now, this is what this gravelly voice guy was saying, that in order to get, you buy a bond for $10,000 at 2%. In order to get 8%, you have to invest for that bond to pay. You have to buy it at $40,000. That's absolutely asinine, backwards, fucking stupid, wrong. And in order for that bond, $10,000 bond, to pay a 2% on maturity bond, to pay 8%, you would have to buy that bond at $2,500. Bonds work in reverse of equities. The less interest in them, the higher the percentage rate. The more interest, the lower the return on a bond is. So years and years ago, you'd buy many bonds, uh, $10,000 bonds for $7,000, $8,000, because people felt that their money could be better positions someplace else in other markets where they needed the money desperately, and there was no interest in because you could get great interest or very good interest in other even in savings deposits, and they used to pay checking, pay interest on checking, and so they may have left it, and because there was no interest in that bond, the price of the bond drops. Now at maturity, you get the $10,000 back. But if it's a 10-year bond, a 30-year bond, a 20-year bond, you might be a long way from getting getting that principal $10,000 back. So bonds have a way of floating. If the bond goes to $12,000 because everybody wants the bond, then you're not getting 2% interest because you had to put out that extra $2,000, and if you hold it to maturity, you're only going to get $10,000 back. But if you bought that bond, you're hoping that everybody's worried about their funds, and so they're going to keep buying bonds and run that price of that bond up. But in the old days, as I said, old days maybe, they'd be old days for you. They were in, not that long ago for me, 30, 40 years, that you would find bonds that had long expiration dates, and and often you could get them for $6,000, $7,000, which would, if it was a $10,000 bond and it was paying 2%, you're making a great deal more than 2%. But that's the only way you make more than 2%. Anybody that would gravelly voiced or king or whatever you want to call them that thinks bonds operate any other way is simply wrong. Now the other question was, and it turns out that you have two noisemakers and 7 observers and me, of course, is that they're all Donald Trump followers. Well, nobody's pinned Trump down about anything. This is one of the great swindlers of all time. Now, one of the questions I'd like to ask him is, you, you're all excited about getting the government troops on the ground and everything else to fight ISIS. Well, we've been feeding munitions and small munitions, not anything major, but I mean small arms and all, to the Kurds, because we're saying, oh, them Kurds, they're the bravest ones, and they're fighting ISIS, and they're defending their territory, and they're doing the best job out there. So let's give them weapons. Okay, and then we have Turkey, who's a member of NATO, and we're supposed to go in the defense of Turkey. And what's Turkey doing? Turkey's bombing the Kurds. The Kurds are fighting ISIS. Turkey's supposed to be fighting ISIS. Every once in a while, they'll send a plane out and bomb some nondescript target and call it ISIS. So what do? Do you keep feeding arms to the Kurds, or do you keep paying for a lot of arms for Turkey? Um, Turkey now lets us use their base, and who the hell's going to take over Syria after it's all over? You know, it's such a mess out there. But Trump, all he's going to swoop in with some American troops and yada yada, everything's going to be fine. This man is a jackass. He's a great performer. He's the P.T. Barnum of our time, but he's a jackass. But jackasses pop up all over the place. Thanks for your time.